What would that new future look like for South Africa? What are the new goals? What are the new ambitions? What's the new, I don't want to use the word 1994, what's the new future that works for everyone in South Africa?
I deeply believe South Africa has to have a second republic. And it's predicated on the idea that a first republic was created, and we've run it for 30 years. And what was designed in 1994, there are just unforeseen circumstances that happened, some unintended consequences, and governance then needs to change. And sometimes the republic needs to change. And a really good example, so Parliament is now going to deliberate around electoral reform. So when you think about the PR system that we have in the country now, it's a complete political compromise. It was a system that was created for that moment of 1994 of we need to ensure that everyone is represented and has a seat at the table. We are now seeing that that system is flawed because it detaches politicians from citizens as well. There's no direct contestation between the two because it's a closed list PR system, which is wild. When you look across the world, no one does closed list for this very reason because it gives too much power to political organizations. That's a republic change. That is you saying the electoral system from the First Republic has not served citizens. We can change this. Another one is maybe not an intervention, but reframing the way we think about the state. I don't think the South African state has fundamentally changed its logic from apartheid, right? Because if it had fundamentally changed its logic, you wouldn't have people building RDP houses in the outskirts of cities as a normal occurrence of governance. You wouldn't have a situation where if you are black in this country or a person of color, you'll most likely be in poverty or you'll most likely be unemployed. That's a systemic thing that the state has not fundamentally changed. And the question then becomes, well, what's happening within the state that's perpetuating this legacy? That's a conversation. It's a hard conversation. It's not to say 1994 didn't give us freedoms. The fact that we're all sitting in this one room is an amazing aspect of the First Republic. But to believe that the First Republic would have solved every single fundamental issue, I think is the wrong logic. And I think this notion of consensus is asking the questions of, okay, we did our best. We got everyone equal rights. Everyone has the right to vote. We solved that issue. But now we have unemployment, systemic inequality, systemic unemployment, gender-based violence, the four threats that I think are the biggest in the country. Haven't even talked about the environment in any particular way. What do we do with the Second Republic to now solve these new issues that are more systemic in nature? So I would formulate it around not assuming that the state is fundamentally new, but asking what are the legacies that are still entrenched within our society, and how do we now address it on the basis of equal rights, self-determination, everyone has the right to vote.
But if we speak about the challenges that we have as a country, you cannot solve, and this is something that's often repeated, you cannot solve 30 years of colonialism, apartheid, structural inequality, and very clear, very efficient ways of discrimination. And so is it a more time issue? Is it a more action issue? Is it a more collaboration issue? Because I think everyone understands the challenges that are in South Africa. But time, that's an issue.
So just try and build on that briefly and say that when we talk about the new consensus, people are often a bit scared because it's like, ooh, people have challenged the Constitution, and you might be playing into a right-wing populist agenda. And make no mistake about it, that agenda exists in South Africa. But I think often we have ceded ground to that agenda to come up with new and innovative, even if terrifying proposals. And just our response is, no, let's go back to what we know. And for me, that new consensus or the new way forward would need to be these simultaneous sweeping moves all at once. Because part of the problem with the crisis is that if you just solve unemployment, well, poverty is going to come and get you. But if you solve poverty, then unemployment will come and get you. If you just look at education, healthcare is going to come and get you. So there needs to be this simultaneity of action. So somehow when a new government comes in, And sadly, the only time we've seen this really is with the apartheid government, because 1948, they were like, we're legislating 17 different things tomorrow. It has to be this simultaneous set of actions, which are both deep and structural and will take a long time, and that people will feel tomorrow, some of them. Now, I have absolutely no idea exactly what that combination is, but that's what we're solving for. What does that suite of actions look like?
This is starting to get to a question I had as you and Khotsi were speaking, and I think the moderator also mentioned this point now, that we kind of understand what the challenges are and that there is this need to actually kind of get on with it now and do it. But the question I was having while you guys were speaking is, what is the body through which that happens? Like, what does it look like in practice? Is it like a task team? That like they bring in McKinsey again and ask them to sort this out for us? But I mean, genuinely, just like, where does it, like, presumably at some point the conversation needs to be had around, okay guys, Monday we're going to do this, this and this and this. Is that in cabinet? Is it in parliament? Is it in some other government, civil society, private sector alliance that where the body can form more movement? I don't know practically where it happens.
I think, Roger, you'd be very well placed to come in here. You've got experience as a DG in government, you've got experience in the private sector, and now you've stepped away from the board. You said you want to see what to do. I mean, maybe give us insight into how you see that working.
Yeah, well, thank you. Look, I think it's not simple, as you've said, right? But the starting point has to be, how do we put the best people together to begin to address some of these questions?
Agreed.
That's the starting point for me. And precisely because of the journey I've walked, I feel that I think I know which questions to ask and where to, I think so, I may be wrong. But I would take water, for example, or public hospitals, which is very close to my heart. I grew up, I used to go to the Coronationville Hospital, which is now Reimagining Hospital. It's in the news all the time, right? It's a shell of what it was even 10 years ago. So how do we begin to fix those things? So in my simple mind, fixing the state is a big part of this task, because the posture of policymakers to expertise will influence the outcome, right? So if you have a posture where you basically at war with your business community, with your intelligentsia, with your professionals, it almost systemically means that you can't draw on that. And these are patriotic South Africans who want to be part of the solution. So I think for some of these short-term interventions that we need, and I mean, okay, you said, okay, 30 years is it time? There are other countries that have fixed things in a shorter period of time, simply because the state, working with other sectors of society, tackled those issues, and there are a myriad of examples. We just need to put our best foot forward, I think, as South Africans, and that means that we come out of our corners. 2024 and beyond is going to demand a less ideological approach to solving some of our problems. So, to put it simply, how do we get the job done? And that will be a big focus of mine. But I'm very keen to hear from all of you on how you see this interplay, because we do know that the state's been hollowed out. There's no capital, there's no expertise, etc. I agree with you, Sizwe. One of the important things we must not lose sight of as we start to fix things is, how do we rebuild state capacity, right? And part of that rebuilding is to make sure that those honest public servants, and I agree with you, I don't buy the sweeping condemnation of public servants, okay? There's a problem. If you go into the public service, you will find a lot of frustrated public servants who are overlooked, frustrated, and I think part of this project is to empower them to be part of the solution, because they're waiting to break through also. So the dysfunction in our governance is affecting the public service, it's affecting service delivery, it's affecting the way citizens relate to the state, that disempowerment. And I don't want to make it sound as a simple solution, But my overarching view is that we are only going to solve this together. So we need to step into a mindset that says things are crumbling. How do we solve for it today? And what is it going to take for us to solve for it today?